Welcome to the Want to Learn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. I have back again Derek Loudermilk. How are you, Derek?
Francis, I'm doing well. Good to see you again.
Likewise, likewise. So, listen, today we're going to talk about a lot of subjects that I don't believe in at all. I think it's all bullshit. But I have an open mind, or at least I claim I have an open mind. Maybe I don't. And I imagine some of the listeners here and also think that they have an open mind. Well, we're going to find out because this is your chance to kind of make your arguments of some things that I think, I'm not convinced by the evidence. And so, but you're here to kind of make the case. So we're going to talk about a variety of subjects of the spiritual, of the unseen, and let's discuss that. So let's start off with number one, lucid dreaming. Go ahead.
Yeah, and first of all, I want to thank you because last time we did a show on your podcast, I got to talk about things that I didn't have a chance to talk about publicly before that, and it was also a process of just helping me understand how I was connecting all sort of dots from different things I was learning. So it's actually been very helpful, and so I'm really excited to come back on. There's this famous Mark Twain quote, "How will I know what I think until I see what I say?" And there's this almost a process of discovery about how much one has come to understand when somebody asks you to teach it. So
That's so well said. I love that saying. I never heard it before. And it also reminds me of when I'm hiking in the mountains for back in the day when we didn't have anything in our ears like podcasts or music. We would just walk in silence in the mountains. And I would often talk to myself when I was in the mountains. And I felt like when I'm actually speaking aloud, like my thoughts are crisper or more concrete and I kind of solidify my thinking or my logic versus when you're just sitting there ruminating, without saying anything. So it's fascinating. So say that saying one more time.
how will I know what I think until I see what I say?
Love it. Love it.
So lucid dreaming, I got into lucid dreaming when my wife was pregnant.
Hold on. Define lucid dreaming first for those who don't know.
Well, so actually, I learned about the idea of lucid dreaming, and what lucid dreaming is, in one sense, is when you become aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming.
Right.
And
It's
so,
different than daydreaming though.
exactly, yeah, lucid dreaming occurs within nighttime, dream time, and
So
I
you're
had
having a
never,
dream and you know you're having a dream and then
yes,
sometimes
something.
you might be able to manipulate the dream by knowing that you're in the dream maybe or you're just aware or it could be
Once you
both.
become aware, then you can do anything you want. Yes, and
God mode.
it's powerful. It feels like you just snap your fingers and you change the scene. You snap your fingers and somebody appears before you, or right. The laws of physics don't apply in dream time, so you can do anything. You can walk through walls. You can fly. You can have sex with someone you've always wanted to have sex with. Whatever you choose to do, because the normal rules of waking life are suspended in dream time.
That's my lucid dream. Once I realized I was in a dream, I imagined could I have a conversation with Derek Loudermilk? And so I just shifted the dream to that.
Well, that's something that you could do, and there's these
And look, it's
tribes.
coming true. It's coming
It's
true.
coming true. Maybe this is a dream. So here's something to ask yourself if you're listening right now: is this a dream? Is this a dream right now? And most people say, no, of course it's not a dream. I'm awake. And then the next question.
I could submit that we're all living in a simulation. In that sense, we're dreaming.
Yes, that's a whole nother train of thought. But let's just talk about like, how do you know if you're dreaming? And if you're able to assess whether you're dreaming now in the waking state, like if you can pinch yourself or the light switches work or whatever you use to sort of verify you're in physical reality. If you apply the same thinking in your dreams, if you ask yourself at some point in your dream, is this a dream? Like, can I really fly, or is there really a talking dog? And you're like, well, no, that's a good sign that we might be in a dream. And then as you get used to assessing your reality in waking time, then you can assess your reality in dream time and then become aware that you're dreaming.
Right. Follow that 100%. And so once you have a realization that you're dreaming, then what's the, I guess, what's the meaning? I mean, a lot of people attach meanings to dreams.
Yes.
And what is, some people see it as a forecasting tool, like seeing the future. Other people just see it as a backdoor to your psyche. What's your take?
Yeah, and so this is amazingly exciting because lucid dreaming is just a small part of what you can practically use dreams for. And this is something I teach in my business mastermind, is how to, because everybody's like, make money in your sleep, and they're thinking passive income. But when I say make money in your sleep, I'm saying you get the insights that you need to find the right business partners, to find the right business opportunities, to know who to hire, to know all the questions you have of all these things can be accessed through Dreamtime. And I've seen this in my own life and through my clients and my friends who practice this over and over again. They get the exact thing they need from Dreamtime. So it's incredibly powerful.
How is that different from, let's say, The Secret, which is this whole law of attraction, that kind of stuff? It's related, it seems.
Well, it's a lot of that does have to do with like what's your intent, right? So if you want to start either lucid dreaming or just getting decision making help while dreaming, or creativity while dreaming, it starts with the intent. So as you fall asleep at night, what's your intent? And it's so amazing because we spend hours dreaming each night, and so most people, right, they're limited in their productivity of how much they can get done during the daytime. To, I don't know, you could work 15 hours, but then you still have to sleep. So it opens up vastly more productive time in terms of figuring out things, creative problem solving, all this stuff. But so whatever question you hold in your mind, whatever you're focusing on as you fall asleep, I want my unconscious mind to bring me a certain insight, how to handle a situation. Or, the very first time I started really asking questions of my subconscious mind was when I was buying this house. And because I had looked at 35, 40 houses, and I really wanted to know, how am I going to know if this is the house? And my wife said, I think this is it. I think this is the one. And I was like, there's some things like rationally it's not quite perfect. The kitchen's small, et cetera, et cetera. It needs some repairs. But I asked my subconscious, can you confirm for me, I believe this is the right house. Can you confirm for me that this is right? And I got this just disembodied voice of God sort of just booming like, yes, this is the house for you. And I was like, holy shit. And then you have to ask yourself, am I going to trust this? Am I going to trust that my own subconscious mind is acting in my best interest, or am I going to overthink it and doubt? And so then you're like, well, can I successfully just think my way through this problem? And sometimes you wind up still, right? You think about it for days, and then there's still some doubts.
Right.
And so when you access your subconscious, and if you really trust that your subconscious understands things even more fully than your rational mind can, because there's, our rational mind is limited, but our unconscious mind is, it's much broader. So I've used this for decision-making tools, but basically I was like, wow, that's amazing. But I still didn't quite believe it. So again, I asked the next night, I said, can you confirm for me in a different way that this is the right house for me, in a way that helps me understand why this is the right house more fully? And instead of a voice, the next night I got a series of images of us using the fireplace in this house, and of us driving away from this house going to the zoo. And basically my interpretation was that I was seeing scenes of my family using this house because this was the right house. And so it comes also down to your interpretation. How did you feel? If you were around the fireplace, did it feel like home, or did it feel like you were a guest, or did you feel good, or did you feel yucky? So So a lot of times people say like, oh, just look up a dream symbol. Go look it up on the internet, and a turtle means whatever. But that's not necessarily going to be universal. It's what you experience the symbolism to mean. If somebody shows up in your dream, well, what does that mean to you, and how did it make you feel? And is there any indication for you to do something with that information?
Right. Now, but here's the problem I have a little bit with all that. I mean, there's a notion implicit in a lot of this discussion so far regarding dreams and, the voices and the images that you might get. The notion is this, that your subconscious or your gut usually or always gives you the right answer. And that's something that I understand, the logic behind that. And a lot of times people will say like, hey, do you want to go to this university or that university? Well, go with your gut, because your gut always knows, right? Right? And sometimes I'm like, well, sometimes our gut is fucking wrong. Sometimes we make mistakes. Like I just think if you're a Navy SEAL and your gut tells you, you should open this door, and you open this door and it's the wrong door, and then you get shot at, your gut was wrong. So how do you know when your gut is right? Is it always right?
Well, we're talking about a couple different things here. We're talking about listening to your gut is different than accessing information from your subconscious.
Agreed. No, but what I'm suggesting is that the idea of listening to your subconscious and your gut are both these things that are kind of in a way outside of your rational thought, if you will. It's kind of like something else. It's part of you, obviously. But does that make sense? That they're both?
Yeah,
these,
and
like other things that
and
you have to kind of listen to, that are almost like these wild beasts in your brain that are part of you that you have to kind of like occasionally like say, oh yeah, my gut or my dream or my whatever, my subconscious.
yeah, and what I see with my entrepreneurial clients is that most of them are overthinkers. Most of them place such a power
Yes.
in their rational thinking.
I'm guilty.
And we know that the brain has circuitry, and so most of the thoughts you're thinking today are very similar to the thoughts you were thinking the day before. It's a sort of a brain pattern of thinking.
Sure.
And it's a very limited approach, just relying on sort of your habitual thinking patterns. And if you aren't accessing, or if you aren't listening to your gut, right? If there's key information there that you're just ignoring because you think you can think your way out of it, then you're missing a ton of useful information. Like if you know something doesn't feel good, but you rationalize doing it anyway, it's probably you're going to keep putting yourself in suboptimal situations, which I ended up going all the way to getting married because of my rational mind. I didn't really want to be married, but this is the first time I was married, but I really wanted, I really liked my girlfriend. I wanted her to be happy. So, and I thought it would make her happy. So I ended up going all the way down the line to getting married, even though my gut kept telling me like, I don't have a great feeling about this. So that only lasted a year and a half. It's much better that we aren't married. So your rational mind can get you into situations that are suboptimal.
But have you thought of any examples of either dreams or listening to your subconscious or listening to your gut, and that ends up in retrospect being a bad decision?
No, I haven't had that experience.
So you subscribe to the notion that your gut, your subconscious is always right, or whatever, 99% of the time right, and that is something that I kind of I'm skeptical, because Derek, your gut or your subconscious could be super attuned and really sharp and accurate, but
Mm-hmm.
I would submit that some people's gut has is poorly wired, or like is
Well,
diluted,
let's think about this. Not everyone is going to get accurate gut information because of the diversity among people.
right.
You may be the type of person that makes decisions in different ways. But a lot of people, like the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself, know your gut instincts. But some people just don't have that, and so
Exactly. So that's the crux of the issue, because it's hard to know if you're one of these lucky guys like you, maybe that are born that have this, either you're in tune to it or whatever, that your gut and your subconscious is usually right, or you're a loser and you just, unfortunately, your gut always tells you the wrong fucking thing to do. Like, yes, jump off that plane without a parachute. That sounds like a great idea, because that's what my subconscious tells me to do.
well, there's all kinds of different personality profiles from Myers-Briggs to Enneagram to Human Design, which can give you indications as to what type of person you are, and
Okay.
then you can test that against your experience.
Fine. But how does that tell me whether I'm an ISTJ or an EST, whatever? Whether you're going to be, if your instincts are good or bad, or your gut is good or bad, or your subconscious is accurate or not?
Well, so like human design is something that I've just started learning about, but it's very interesting. It's based on um, sort of Chinese I Ching, and sort of paired with astrology,
Okay.
and it's
What's it
basically
called again?
saying
Can you repeat that?
it's called
What's it called?
human design,
Okay.
and I've seen it to be effective in.
What is the purpose, or the kind of like the methodology, or the? You said it's marrying Chinese and astrology. Sorry.
Yes, the I Ching, and astrology. So you need to sort of know your birth information. And so I started looking into this because I had clients that were not able to access their gut to make decisions. It wasn't working for them. So I started asking myself, is there a better way I can support these clients, because they're trying to do business, and they're trying this certain type of marketing. They're putting themselves out there. They're in a way a thought leader, but a lot of things just weren't working. And so I started looking into this, and there's many different aspects to human design, for example, and I don't fully understand it, but key things are how you sort of interact with the world. It's going to sort of tell you sort of naturally how you're supposed to be interacting. And people like myself, which are typed as generators, most people, like 75% of people, are generators, so they're going to effectively move forward in life by responding to things in their environment. So they get a yes or no, they get a gut instinct as a response to what they're observing or seeing or experiencing.
Okay.
But some people, they need to work a different way. And so one of my clients needed to be invited. So this human design said, you're this type of person, called a projector, that needs to be invited in order for you to move forward. And so we started, instead of optimizing for like you can't push out marketing, right? If you're the type of person that needs to be invited, you can't try to force things to happen. You can't be like, I'm going to do this brand new initiative. I'm going to just get everyone on board. I'm going to be a leader by this. It's sort of the other way around. And so once we started doing business in a way that prioritized invitations, her business took off, and all kinds of amazing things happened. So it's, at this point, it's an experiment for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm seeing it work really, really well. So I'm going to continue to try to figure out how I can use this tool.
Okay. I had a question though. Getting
Yeah.
back to lucid dreaming, because we're kind of veering a little bit off the topic. I want to kind of wrap that up before we move on. What about people like me who basically almost never remembers my dream? In a year, I might remember 3 of my dreams or something like that. In an entire year, I just don't. So, how do you deal with? What do you say to those? I mean, you can't do lucid dreaming if you can't even remember your fucking dream.
Right. And I say lucid dreaming is like step 3. So step 1 is, and we know from science, right, that everybody's dreaming every night. Everybody's in a REM state. And if you're not remembering your dreams, it's because it's just slipped away. So the very first thing that I tell people to do is keep a dream journal next to your bed. Write down the dream as soon as you wake up, because within a few seconds it starts to slip away.
It's fascinating how that happens. You're right. I mean, it does. But in my case, it's even worse. I don't even remember the moment I wake up. I mean, I'm just like, I mean, okay, I'm lying. If I were to do that, which is good advice, I probably would remember maybe 20 dreams out of a year. Do you? I assume you dream every fucking night?
Well, it's a skill, and what I love about it is that this is trainable, and I've spent the last 5 years doing this, and it's just like any other skill. Once you train this skill, right? And so my first intent was like, I'm just gonna wake up and remember my dreams. I intend that this will happen, and then it started happening, and I could write down my dreams, and I could, maybe the first few times it was like, I think there was an elephant, or I think my college roommate was in there, and that was all. But as you do it, you remember longer and longer stretches, and now I can remember, full length, hour long scenarios where I'm going here and there, and I'm having conversations and experiences, and then you start to get this very rich sort of dream life that you could interpret, like, is this useful? Is this just my subconscious processing things? Is it just because a lot of dreams are just nonsense.
Right.
But if you have a very specific intent before you go to bed to understand a thing, and you get the sense, this dream is telling me exactly about, so let's say, should I work with this person? Should I hire them, or should I be their coach, or should I partner with this person? And you're not sure. Your gut's not quite, your brain and your gut are telling you different, whatever. So it's not super clear, and you kind of want to. So your intent might be, can you confirm for me, subconscious, in a way that I will understand definitively if I should work with this person? And then you're going to get something. And it might be very clear, or it might be kind of full of symbolism and hard to decipher.
Got it.
And so if you don't get a clear answer, but you think your subconscious is trying to get you the answer, you may have to ask again the next night. You may have to say, okay, I didn't really understand. Can you clarify? Can you say it in a different way? Can you get this to me in a way so that I absolutely know for sure? And so sometimes it takes a couple tries, but sometimes you get a super clear answer right away, and you know that this is the direction you should go forward with. It removes any doubt you have whether your rational mind is saying like whatever. And that is a powerful place to be, because another place where people get stuck is in indecision. And the most successful entrepreneurs, as you know, they make a decision and they move forward, and they can start then working from momentum and progress and all these things. But if you get stuck in inaction from not trusting yourself or not being able to make a decision, then you're going to get left behind. So this is a really powerful tool for entrepreneurs and anybody that's creating something in the world to simply keep moving forwards.
Got it. No, that's very well said. And I think that for those who want to explore dreams, I think your advice of just trying to capture it from the second you get up and having a dream journal right next to your bed is really good. And then the trouble, of course, is how to interpret those dreams. But at least if you want to get to the skill of being able to have lucid dreams and be able to manipulate and control your dreams, it's like a muscle, your dream muscle. In other words, that you've got to exercise it, and that's the way you're going to be able to control it. And that makes a whole lot of sense to me. But what doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me is this notion of collective unconscious. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, what I've experienced this year, and what a lot of people I've talked to who are active dreamers have experienced, is that this year their dreams are more vivid, more powerful, more informative, and have more sort of interaction with other people in them. And my theory is that because globally we're all sharing this pandemic experience, that we're all, our collective unconscious is sort of tying us together in a way that it hasn't before. We're all sort of harmonizing in a way. And, this is pioneered by Carl Jung. He was the first to sort of describe it. and so once the pandemic hit, everybody's that I was working with on dreams, their dreams got much more reliable, much more vivid, much more um, useful even, and they were able to connect with other people. So whenever somebody, like if somebody appears in my dream that I haven't talked to in a while, uh, usually I will take that as a sign that there's something I should be looking at there. Whether it's, should I circle back? Should I build that relationship? Is there an opportunity here that I sort of wouldn't know about on the surface? And so many times it's proven that they were just thinking about me and they had an idea for us to work together or something that we could do, or even two of my friends, they were both appeared in a dream. It was a really cool dream. Actually, it was a fun story. They're all Instagrammers, and we organized a heli ski wedding for them for like social media, just to like, it was kind of a fake wedding, but we're going to jump out of helicopters and get married on top of a mountain and then ski down. It was like a really cool dream. And I was like, hey guys, you were in my dream. You guys were getting married. I was the officiant. And here's what happened. And they were like, that sounds rad. Well, they ended up dating. They ended up, you know, they were both happened to be in LA at the same time, and they ended up dating. And, you know, that all happened because of this random sort of dream encounter. And that happens a lot.
So that's an example of a collective unconscious.
Yeah. I would say, you know, you're tapping into, and because, you know, consciousness is not, doesn't have to be localized, right? Because in dream time, you know, you can go somewhere else, and you'll still be conscious. So it's not necessarily tied to a physical reality. And actually, so speaking of consciousness, they've just discovered these nanotubules in the neurons in the brain that are the receivers of consciousness. So there was a big theory that the brain was a receiver, like a satellite dish or a radio tower, and they've just sort of shown this evidence. I just learned about this a couple weeks ago, that the brain effectively uses these you know, quantum scale nanotubules to act as the receiver of consciousness in the brain, which is amazing. Which means consciousness is external from the 3D brain.
Got it. And so that's where this notion of a collective unconscious could come from.
Yeah.
Now, again, I look at it from a kind of a scientific point of view, if you might want to call it that. I don't know if that's fair, but the idea that, you know, we're maybe in a simulation. And if we are in a simulation, then that definitely means that we could be all interconnected through the back end computer or whatever simulator that we're living in. So that's another potential opportunity there. Now, you had an encounter that you want to share with us, a telepathic encounter with an extraterrestrial. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first, actually, let's talk a little bit about the idea of a simulation or holographic reality. And I think it's really useful to look at. We're perceiving reality with our five senses. But that's really a sort of a decoding of information fields. So like when you hear us talking, what you're actually hearing is a sound vibration that's generated by my vocal cords and then is sort of decoded and reconstructed by your mind to be words and information. But it's really just a field of frequency and vibration. And we know that physical matter is a field created by atoms. It's actually, you know, not solid. So in a sense, as we see, hear, touch, taste, you know, all these things, we're just decoding the field, the electromagnetic field, the quantum field that's underlying that. And so I'm bringing that because now I've lost my train of thought. But
we're talking about the telepathy and interconnected aliens, dreamscape.
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of things, but just knowing that your senses are simply decoding a a field, a physics-based field, and
Right.
that it's a very limited, right? We see invisible light, but we know that there's this huge spectrum of light. We know that there's a huge spectrum of radio frequencies that we can't perceive. So just knowing that we're decoding only a very small scale of the total amount of field and the total amount of information and vibrations that are happening all around us.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, that's something that I think that a lot of times we forget, that we're just looking. The visual spectrum, for example, is just a tiny bit of the entire spectrum of light, if you will. And so, but getting back to this extraterrestrial.
Sure. Yeah. And so, as I think it's really important. Like we can talk about this on a podcast, and we can sort of intellectually say, oh, maybe this is true, or maybe this is not true. But when you have a direct experience, then you can start to know for yourself. There's a difference between understanding and knowing. And as you know from your travels, like you can't know what it's like to hike the AT until you actually do it. You can't know what it's like to understand African culture until you're immersed in it, right? You could sort of like look at it from the outside. And so I really, growing up, watching the X-Files, I thought, how cool would it be to meet an alien? And I think a lot of people think of like, oh, an alien lands a spaceship on my lawn and walks out and says hello. Like that would be a way to do it. But that's a very limited view of our perception of the total, right? The fields, which, like, who's to say we're gonna meet a physical alien?
Did
Who's
you
to
see the
say?
movie Contact
I
or
did.
read the book?
And refresh me. Is it?
Carl Sagan wrote this book called Contact, for those who
Yeah.
haven't heard about it or seen the movie, with Jodie Foster. And I remember because I read the book first, and I thought it was such an ingenious solution to the problem of Carl Sagan having to come up with an alien. And then the alien just infiltrated the person's mind and came in and appeared as his father, or her father. So basically a figure that she trusted and knew well.
Yes.
And then they communicated to Jodie Foster, and as far as she knew she was looking at her father physically, but she also was cognizant that this is not really my father's personality or mind. I'm talking to an alien. It's from the Vega star system 20 light years away. And I thought that was an ingenious kind of twist to like not say that the alien has 3 heads or, 2 arms or is a jellyfish or whatever, just some sort, or Star Trek, they put on some makeup and it's a bipedal organism. Instead, Carl Sagan just pushed that all aside and just said, okay, how about if I just make it look like a human being and just at least in the perception of a human being?
Yeah. And so what's interesting to think about is maybe, did he talk to a bunch of people who had experienced something like that, or did he pull that out of his own creativity?
I don't know.
Was that from his dream time? Was that from the collective unconscious? Like that's an interesting question of like where great ideas come from, because a lot of great ideas happen around the world at the same time. Flight independently invented, language independently invented at the same time at different places. So what's going on there? Collective unconscious, I would say, is like bringing these things to the surface. But anyway, so Carl, so this is exactly what, so I was looking to experience. Like if I can't go out and just meet an alien on my street, if I don't really know, but I've heard lots and lots of people, they just get aliens just talking to them. And wouldn't that be cool if I could do that? And I've even had somebody on my podcast who is able to put their consciousness aside and let these sort of interdimensional beings speak through them. It's called channeling. There's a lot of famous channels on YouTube. And it was this sort of a conscious entity that was sort of speaking through them. And that was super cool. And I was like, I kind of want to see what that's like. And there just happened to be earlier this summer something called the Harmonic Convergence, which last happened in the 80s, and there's the same sort of alignment of the planets and the stars in our solar system that the Harmonic Convergence was happening again this summer. And last time it happened was the first sort of global meditation where there was like hundreds of thousands of people all meditating with the same intent at the same time.
Is this the unified feel intention experiment?
This is different. I'll talk about that in a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay.
But this was just like an event I was participating in, and so the part of the goal was for contact to be made, for either ships to show up, spaceships, or simply some sign that our conscious intent was being received and understood in such a way that we could understand it. And I believe 170,000 people participated this year at the same time, and 70% of those people, so whatever that figure is, saw a ship or an orb or something in their sky. So this is everybody joining on Zoom all at the same time or like throughout the day. 70% of those people reported seeing something flying above their house. I didn't see anything. I was looking. I was really hoping. I stayed up late, but I didn't see anything. But I did get a direct, kind of like when I asked my dream time, and I got that sort of big disembodied yes. That night, I had a long conversation with an entity that told me, thank you so much for participating in the Harmonic Convergence. We are aliens, and we're really pleased to be interacting with you. I believe they said where they're from, but I don't remember. But they just said, like, we want to confirm for you that even though you didn't see a ship, that this meditation worked, and this is your proof. We're coming to you telepathically in dream time, and we're taking a different voice that's not your voice, so you can distinguish between our consciousness and your consciousness. And this is the way that we can get to you. And so they just sort of conferred that information to me through Dreamtime, and it made me feel it was very exciting, and it was very like peaceful and loving. And you could tell that, and this is what people sort of report across the board when they interact with interdimensionals or extraterrestrials, this sort of pervasive sense of love, peace, well-being emanating from the other being. And that's what I felt. And it was just remarkable to sort of get to, and whether it was like real, whether there was a real entity communicating telepathically, or if it was just my subconscious mind telling me like, that's a good thing that you did. I was left with an experience of contacting another consciousness, not physically, but in my understanding, in my awareness. And
But then how do you what your skeptical side of yourself, Derek? Like, you might say to yourself, "But how do I know? How do I know that I'm not imagining all this?"
right, and that's possible. And it didn't really matter. It doesn't really matter.
Right. Okay.
Necessarily. If it happens over and over again, and eventually they land on my front lawn, and they're like, "Hey, we've been talking to you all these years, and now we're here because you're ready to actually see a physical manifestation of us," or we had to get there, like we were flying from a long way off, and we we weren't there yet to meet you, or any of this stuff. Well, that would be just additional information, right? That's just extra proof that.
And what do you think? Okay, so let's say they showed up on your front lawn. They say, "Okay, here's your Domino's pizza, and let me." I mean, what are they there for? In other words, are they going to abduct you, or they're going to just hang out and talk with you, and then take off and fly back to their solar system?
Well, so my understanding is, and I've since we last talked, I've watched several documentaries of people who have worked with extraterrestrials in these sort of secret government projects at Area 51 and all that stuff. And I sort of understand that there's up to, I believe, 36 species of aliens that the CIA has said, like, we have public policy. The CIA has public policy towards 36 different sort of alien races, and that 95% of them are benevolent and they want to help us if they can. And 5% are sort of bad actors who want to either eat us or steal our planet or our wealth or enslave us or something like that. So there's like mostly good actors, just like anywhere, just like in our human population. But there's also universal laws where you can't mess with someone's free will. And
Okay.
so they can't, if you take away someone's free will, it will impact your own free will. Your own free will. So one universal law is like you get out what you put in, and
Yeah, but I
so
just don't understand how, let's say, 5% of the of aliens are having a negative, thing. They're technologically so much, millions of years ahead of us. What's to stop them, aside from the 95% of good aliens, I suppose, from doing whatever the hell they want with us? That's one issue. Anyway, go ahead. I'll let you answer that one.
um, so my understanding is that I mean we can look around and see that there's negative things happening on our planet. There's like things that are terrible things that are happening.
Hmm.
Uh, that is probably a sign that it's not necessarily just us. It's not just the 5% of our bad actors, but there's influence, potentially influence from other types of beings that sort of want to have their fingers in our soup.
Okay. So, like the coronavirus, for example, could have been invented by these bad aliens in order to
Mm,
create chaos.
I would say the most likely scenario is that the, it's probably a bioterrorism, right? If somebody created it, it was probably us.
Human-made bioterrorism as opposed to extraterrestrial bioterrorism.
Yeah, I would say that's probably more
Okay.
likely.
Okay. And I just don't. I guess my big struggle is that when somebody has a juicy secret, it's very hard to shut them up. They got to tell at least their spouse. They have to tell their brother or next of kin, somebody, their best friend. And so I just can't believe that the CIA has 35 alien species documented and that doesn't sneak out and get leaked out. So many things get leaked out in a very obvious way with hard evidence as opposed to, I mean, you might say, well, Francis, it did leak out. I mean, after all, we know about it. It's
Yeah,
on YouTube or
yeah, we're
whatever.
talking about it right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But a real leak to me is like hard evidence where it would show up on academic papers, peer-reviewed journals. It would show up on CNN, and you would see it everywhere. I mean, it's such a juicy secret. I mean, think about this: when the mainstream media finds that there's like water existed on Mars or may still exist, liquid water may still be on Mars. I mean, that hits the news. I mean, we're not even talking about life. We're just talking about H2O. And so how could they possibly, this would be the tale of the century, and not the century, of humanity's history. We're not going to put a lid on that.
Well, let's just look at a previous secret that people couldn't believe that happened, the Manhattan Project. Even people within the Manhattan Project didn't know what they were working on. So even
Understood.
if they let it spill, right, it's compartmentalized in such a way that you could talk about it, but there wasn't the whole picture. And then all of a sudden, they sort of had to announce we had this weapon, or maybe they didn't announce it until they dropped it, and they said, "Oh, by the way, we developed this weapon." Anyway, it was this huge, massive project. Right, there's tens of thousands of people working on the Manhattan Project, and nobody knew about it, or it was compartmentalized in such a way that it could be effectively kept secret, even if you sort of had an inkling that it was happening. And that's just one example. And
I'll give you another example, by the way.
sure,
The I forgot the first name. It's the Ribbentrop-Molotov secret agreement it was between Stalin and Hitler, that they would divide Eastern Europe a certain way, right along the Polish border. And they had kind of said, okay, Germany gets Poland and the USSR gets everything to the east of that.
Yeah.
And that was a secret agreement. And it was a pact between, I forget, the Secretary of States, I believe, of each of the respective countries of Nazi Germany and USSR.
Yep.
And it took about 6 years, I think, if I remember correctly, maybe 7 years, for the United States and the Allies, the Western world, to find out about this secret agreement. So it happened, we learned about it in 1947, like 2 years after World War II ended, like, holy shit. We didn't even know this secret that they've been putting a lid on for 7 years. So despite all the CIA's effort to try to infiltrate the USSR, they finally figured it out, that there was an agreement between Hitler and Stalin. But here's the best part. The USSR kept that secret for 50 years from the Soviets, from their own citizens. In other words, it was Gorbachev on the 50th anniversary of the Ribbentrop-Molotov pact.
Yeah.
On the 50th anniversary, Gorbachev announced on television, I believe, we had this agreement. Yes, it's true. But here's the thing. There were rumors throughout Eastern Europe and the Warsaw Pact that such a thing existed. Why? Because, of course, in 1947, the United States and the Western powers knew about it, and so of course that information leaked to Eastern Europe. So for roughly, 42 years, they kind of knew, or 43 years, they kind of knew it existed, but they didn't really know. But it was only 50 years later. That was probably one of the best kept secrets in that sense. But getting back to aliens, this is not some sort of secret pact between USSR, and it's not like a Manhattan Project. This is just beyond so juicy. And by the way, the Manhattan Project, the lid wasn't kept on that information for very long. So I just find it, anyway, I hear what you're saying. I cannot imagine that we've been keeping a lid on extraterrestrial life for decades.
Well, let's say that we actually haven't, right? Let's say that because at this point, I've probably seen 400 or 500 interviews with people who have worked with aliens, or they know aliens, or they worked on projects that are part of a secret space program, all of these things. And so I think for a long time, people were just waiting for the president to say, hey, there's aliens.
Yeah, I don't know if we need a president. We just need a credible mainstream source. So like if ABC News announces it and gives proof, especially physical evidence, that would be the most compelling, because otherwise it's just talking stories.
Yeah, and I don't think you couldn't rely on the CIA, you couldn't rely on the president, you couldn't rely on ABC News or anybody to give you sort of, maybe they'll give you some information, right? And we're already seeing the Pentagon is releasing some information about their UFO tracking program and their technologies. Essentially, they're saying they can do time travel and they can do anti-gravity and all this stuff. They have the patents for it. So there's sort of...
Who's they? Sorry, the U.S. government?
The Navy has these patents.
Patents for time travel?
Yep, patents for free energy, time travel, and mass reduction. So essentially anti-gravity, where you create a gravitational field around an object.
I would have to see that. I would have to see the patent.
They came out June of last year.
All right. Well, maybe I'll put it in the show notes if you can send me the link to that. That would be cool.
Yeah, and so right, like, okay, well that's kind of interesting.
Those things, like, I mean, how do I know what the election count in Georgia is, or something silly like that, and I don't know that there's an anti-gravity patent, or that should be the headline news. That should be above who won the 2020 election.
That's what I think too.
Okay.
And
So,
so people
so
are getting.
therefore, it's not it must not be compelling enough evidence to make that the headline above the 2020 election or above COVID.
Well, there's always a hierarchy, let's say, of what's there's always someone above all this stuff. So there's somebody higher up making decisions about what can be released and what can't. There's
Yeah, sure.
someone higher up saying, here's the strategy of the election, and here's the long-term strategy. Here's the multi-decades, here's the multi-century long strategy that this election or this war or anything is going to move the needle on. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at the result of an election, or when you're getting caught up in something and it's causing your attention to like drill down into this one thing, you're ignoring all the other things because your attention is focused on writing or the election tally or any of these things, and you're not paying attention to these patents that the government has, or you're not paying attention to all these other things. And so where is your attention? Because there's a fundamental principle here that I teach my clients. You are where your attention is. What you're thinking about is going to create your reality.
That's very true, and I agree with that. I just think that you can take that also and flip it around and just say, okay, because let's say if like there's people who see Jesus Christ in their milkshake, they see, wow, there's an image of Christ in my milkshake, or they look up at, the Greeks looked up into the stars and saw all sorts of
Yes.
human beings and gods in the stars, because it's kind of like whatever you look at, you manifest. So I agree with that, but that can also be done in such a way that it's perverted, and it's kind of like, I think it was Carl Sagan who said something like, if elephants were in charge of the world, they would look up in the stars and see a bunch of elephants in the stars, and they would see elephants in their milkshake as well. And so we're these pattern-seeking creatures, and then sometimes if we're so obsessed about seeking a certain pattern, we might see it, and that can happen to people who are searching for extraterrestrials, and they manifest that in their mind, or they see pattern where there may not be one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. It's really important to look at one, where's your attention? Two, is there a belief that I'm holding on to? Because when you tell me I'm really skeptical, when people are skeptical, it means I want to sort of have these beliefs, and maybe I'm keeping these other beliefs at arm's length. And so just looking at and a lot of times you don't realize what your beliefs are until you see a different set of beliefs, or until. So there's beliefs that we're all operating on, but there's no such thing as a true or real belief. It's different from a fact.
True.
Or something like
that. I agree with that. I mean, there's people I talk to about Bitcoin, and they say, yeah, I have an open mind about Bitcoin, but then or they're skeptical about Bitcoin, but that skepticism comes to such an extent where they're really, effectively closed-minded about the issue. And I confess that happens to me with regard to God or any kind of spiritual being or aliens. I've got such a degree of skepticism that it's almost, I'm not as open-minded as I claim to be.
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's central to a lot of these things. Is largely beliefs are going to keep you where you are,
right?
And you're going to look for evidence to continue on your beliefs, because that's tied with your ego. It makes you feel good, right, once your beliefs are confirmed. And so I would ask you, where does your skepticism come from? And what is the value, like what is the gain you get from being skeptical?
That's a good question. Well, we all want to believe that we have access to the truth, or at least that we can perceive reality and the truth. And I think that's what we hope to gain. But why are we skeptical? I mean, it reminds me like I'm
asking actually you in particular,
Oh,
and you, because you told me you're going to approach this conversation as a skeptic.
right. So, sorry, your question again is one more time, Derek?
Well, let's say what's the underlying benefit to you to approach this conversation skeptically?
I guess the benefit is that looking at a subject with a critical eye and with a skeptical eye, you're more likely to discover whether that's true or not. I guess you're raising the bar for belief. Like, for example, if you tell me that right now you're happy, my bar for proving that, I guess I don't have a huge amount of skepticism, because I'm like, okay, I'm just going to trust you. All right. I can't, like, could I hook you up to a machine and like give you a battery of tests to prove that Derek is really happy? My level of my bar to believe something like that is very low. So I'm like, if you tell me you're happy, all right, I'm going to believe that you're happy. Fine. But if you tell me that you can walk on water, then my skepticism jumps. And I'm like, the bar has to be very, very high. And I actually say, okay, Derek, I'm just not going to believe you on that one. You're going to actually have to walk on water in front of me, and I'm going to have to see it. So does that make sense?
I don't think it fully answers what benefit that is to you.
What benefit does that mean?
Yeah.
I guess it helps create or confirm or to build my sense of reality, and whether the world I perceive is accurate.
Yeah.
So
And that feels probably once you have that, it feels safe.
I don't know if it's necessarily safe is the right word. It just feels accurate. It feels like, like, okay, now I know what is.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if that's necessarily safe, because you could be
It helps bring you to a state of well-being or peace or something like that.
perhaps, but I mean, like, let's say if I hear bombs going off all around me and explosions everywhere, I'm not feeling safe, but that's reality. There, I'm actually living in a war zone. So, but you can tell yourself that no, those are all illusions. But so I don't think that necessarily, or like, your arm can be cut off, and like, is that really my arm cut off, or am I just imagining that, or is this just a dream? I'm like, I mean, if you think that's reality, yeah, my arm is cut off. You actually can. It doesn't make you feel safe. So I guess what I'm saying is that carving your reality, or at least trying to understand what really is happening, doesn't always bring you to a place of safety or feeling good or that kind of stuff.
Okay. But it sounds like it brings you to a place where you're like, I don't have to question this anymore, or like once you sort of build your model of reality, then you can.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think that's fair to say. Like, I mean, I like to look at puppies. I take care of a lot of dogs, and like, they look at the Roomba, for example, and all of a sudden they're like scared of it, and then eventually they realize it's just a machine and it's not going to really hurt them, and then they're like, okay, I've got that. You put that away. You're like, oh, I understand gravity. I feel comfortable with it. But at any moment, you can revisit any of these assumptions and these, if you find evidence to the contrary. Like, all of a sudden you
Yeah.
start to float, you can question your gravity. Like, wait
Yeah.
a second.
And so let's also look at the flip side of this, because you could choose to be more or less skeptical, or hold on to beliefs more strongly, or resist new beliefs more strongly. What does it cost you to be hyper skeptical? In your words, hyper skeptical.
It costs me, I suppose, a, a level of imagination potentially. Like in other words, being able to imagine something that is presumably or seemingly impossible when it's not. I think a lot of times young people, that's why so much innovation comes from young people, because old people, they've already hardened their view of what is possible and what is not possible. And then young people come along and they kind of stretch that boundary and are able to do things that previously were thought of as impossible.
Yeah, and so the reason I'm asking is just it just helps to illuminate for ourselves, like, oh, I'm hanging on to certain beliefs more strongly, or I'm resisting certain ideas more strongly, and perhaps there's a reason. There's a positive reason that I'm doing that, and perhaps there's a consequence. And then you get to choose. Then you get to choose whether you want to be hyper skeptical or if you no longer want to be skeptical. Because you could continue to be skeptical under overwhelming evidence, right?
Right. Yeah.
So at some
what
point,
I find, here's a fascinating,
yeah.
sorry, we're going to digress slightly, but what I find that fascinating about religion, I have a degree in religion.
Yes.
And to me, I think it's so fascinating that when you talk to a religious person, they have such conviction about their, God, Jesus is the Savior, and it's just so evident and obvious to them. There's just no doubt in their mind.
Yes.
And yet if you ask them about, well, is Muhammad the last prophet of God? They're like, no. I'm like, well, why not? Because there's no evidence. I'm like, really? Okay. And like, what about the Quran? Isn't that the word of God? No. Why not? Well, there's no evidence to kind of back that up. And so and every single religious person is an atheist of all the other religions out there, except their religion. And it's almost like a switch. And so you're kind of like, you turn it on, the skepticism, when it comes to all the other religions, but not to your religion.
Yes.
And we turn off that switch, and and all of a sudden we're so accepting about. So I guess going back to aliens, you can turn off that switch and just say, okay, I'm not going to be skeptical. I'm like, somebody says they're communicating with aliens, I'm going to believe it. Why not? Hey, I can't disprove it, and or whatever. And so all of a sudden you're very accepting of this notion that aliens are visiting us or communicating with us, etc. And then you turn it back on again when it comes to maybe an idea about aliens that maybe doesn't jive with you.
Yeah, and so I think a large part of religion is right. It's a dogma that they've inherited because somebody told them or taught them. Here's how our religion works. Here's how it is. And so much of our life and society is inherited dogma.
Absolutely.
And when you can be free from dogma, when you can examine those beliefs and you're willing to you're willing to hold multiple beliefs or examine multiple, even conflicting beliefs, and know that that's not you necessarily, when you can start to see the dogma and the pattern of ideas that's simply just been taught or imprinted upon you, then you're in a powerful place. Then you can decide, then you can choose if it serves you. You can choose where to place your attention. You can choose, for entrepreneurs, what's the most powerful belief that I can hold here, that something is possible or that it's not possible, that money is easy to make or that it's hard to make. And you can choose to have those beliefs. And going back to a biological level, you can choose, you can rewire your brain by thinking thoughts in a new way, that all of a sudden anything is possible for you. Money is easy to make. I am charismatic. All of these things are belief systems that are more useful, I would say, than other belief systems, like I'm just not good, or somebody's out to get me, or things just don't work out for me, I'm unlucky, whatever they are. So the power lies in understanding where you're stuck in a belief structure.
Very well said. I like that very much. I hope people will replay that and hear what you just said and listen to it again. Let's move on to quantum physics and how consciousness impacts the material world, including a unified field intention experiment that you did with business coaching clients earlier this year.
Yeah. So as I learn more about quantum physics, and I always like to have evidence based to back up when I'm training people, or just when I see phenomena. I like to have scientific evidence. But fundamentally, quantum physics is telling us that science and evidence-based practice is fundamentally flawed because of quantum entanglement. We try to, in science, take a system and isolate it to look at a variable. Like we're going to look at, the process of a cell within a body, or we're going to look at a body within an ecosystem, or we're going to look at an ecosystem within a planet. We're trying to separate it off to understand it and observe and use evidence. But because of quantum entanglement, we know that there is no way to disentangle the effects of somewhere across the universe with a molecule or a quark or a Planck fluctuation that's here. And it's provable by experiment. We know that the observer effect is real from the double slit experiment. So fundamentally, science is missing the entanglement piece, where our interaction with everything matters. Our intent with everything is important. So when you start to see that's what's really going on, then you see you're actually maybe perhaps more powerful in influencing the world than you thought.
Interesting. Yeah. No, and I think that's a good analogy. And I think that looking at science for explanations, or at least perhaps understanding to this window of this world that we still don't understand. I mean, we have this notion that we really understand the universe, but of course we've always thought that, and we've always been completely wrong. Throughout human history, we always said, and now we know what's really going on.
Yeah.
And then a century later, we're like, absolutely not. We got that completely wrong.
It's so funny when I would talk with some of these travelers and explorers and adventurers, and they'd say, I wish I was born in the golden age of exploration. Right.
You're like, you still are. You are still in the very prototype. No, that's very true. Okay, what about these wild things? Speaking about traveling, you said you saw a Balinese secret rainy season ceremony and an out-of-body experience facilitated by a 1,000-year-old magic tree. Tell us about that.
Okay, so let's try to tie these all together. If we can influence the material world with our consciousness, which that's what quantum physics seems to be telling us, then let's harness it. And so I've been doing an experiment all year based on in my business mastermind. So I work with a group of entrepreneurs, and I said, can we apply this to growing their businesses? Can we create a future where what they want comes true by intending it together as a group of people? And there's a lot of evidence that shows this works for healing people. Whether it's a Christian prayer or just people sitting around and holding the intent for somebody's cancer to go away or rash to go away or any of these things. So there's a lot of evidence that shows this collective prayer has a fantastically high success rate. But I wanted to apply that to business. So each month we pick one person to be the receiver. So they're like in the middle of the circle, and we do it on Zoom. So metaphorically speaking, they're in the middle of the circle. And then everybody else is sending the intent for their success to them. But what's really important here is what we send needs to be clear. So we all have to be on the same page about what we're intending. And so we'll let's say the person wants to go on TV. They think that'll make a really big difference in the marketing of their brand and their public image and sort of their trajectory. So they want to go on TV. are we going to visualize them during the TV program? Are we going to visualize them getting more customers because they've been on TV? Like, what part are we going to actually visualize and send? So once we get clear on that, we will also ask the receiver, like, what will it feel like when you're on TV? And so I'll be excited. I'll feel confident. Whatever the feeling state is important as well. So we can send. So partly that's an exercise in another question of who would I be if I already had what I want? If you want to be a billionaire, who would you be if you were a billionaire, and just be that now? So part of this is clarifying to them who they need to be. So if you need to be resourceful and confident and joyful, just start being that now, and you will already be inhabiting that future version of yourself. So that's partly important, is to clarify that for them, who they need to be in order to do the things that will lead to the results they want.
Wow, that is very powerful stuff, and I think that is transformative. Now, if people are listening to this, Derek, and they want your coaching for such development, personal development, how did they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, derekloudermilk.com, or
which I'll link to in the show notes because it's a mouthful.
Yes, I also have a podcast which is now titled The Derek Loudermilk Show. So you can I deconstruct some of the topics we've been talking about today, like intent and the law of attraction and all that stuff I talk about on the podcast. So you can check that out.
Great.
Yeah. So if I can just sort of finish like what we've done with this experiment,
please,
because it's amazing results, 100% effective. Every time somebody wants something and we've done this group intention, it's come true, which is phenomenal, right? If you could have 100% success rate in making your dreams come true, you would continue to do it.
Right.
And so, people have gotten on TV, they've started 6-figure businesses, they've found their ideal romantic partner. One person was like, actually, I don't want to focus on business. I need to get my romance life handled so that I can feel powerful in my business, so that that's not like distracting me from my business. I just found out yesterday that worked within 3 weeks for the last person we did it to. Wow. Amazing. And so all right, we determined like what intent we're going to set for this person, and we just send it to them for 10 minutes. Like we all send the same intent for just 10 minutes or 12 minutes. And the experience, when we start, we play a little music or something, and we get to a calm place where we can be loving and wish for the best for this person. When everybody starts sending their intent, it's like jumping into a river. It's like you can immediately tell that you're sharing consciousness with the other people sending the intent. Everybody feels it. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It makes many of us start to cry. And we often will all report seeing the same thing in our mind's eye at the same time. So we share afterwards, like, oh, what was that experience like for you? And oftentimes, 50 or 60% of the people will say the same exact things that they saw. And it goes back to this unified field of consciousness. We're all participating in sending the same thing, and we're all picking up on the same imagery at the same time. It's phenomenal. It's like we're all jumping into the river and flowing down it together. And it's worth doing just to experience being part of that. It's phenomenal.
It definitely sounds like it, and I think that's a good way to wrap up all the different topics that we touched on today. And I realize, there's so many more things that we could talk about, and we hope to. Maybe we'll reconnect again in 2021. And I wanted just to thank you, Derek, again for coming back on my show. I encourage people to go to Derek Loudermilk Show, subscribe to his podcast, and let's keep the conversation going. And thank you again, Derek.
Francis, thank you for having me. It's phenomenal to have someone, even though you're skeptical, it's phenomenal to have an open-minded intellectual sparring partner like you. So
Semi-open-minded. Don't give me too much credit. Semi-open-minded.